I recognize that this bill is not likely to change, but the emergency clause is going to create substantial problems within the rental market for owners and people who have current projects underway. And it would be good to give them some time to be able to react to whether you like it or not. This is substantial legislation and nothing like it in the country. And I think it's important that rental owners understand what it is that's been passed so they can react in a way to adhere to the law.
Further discussion, Senator Gerard?
Thank you, Chair Fagan. I would agree with my colleague from Ben. This is a huge piece of legislation, and we owe it to the landlords to get the message out and to fast track this. So some people are inadvertently going to break a rule here or there when they think they're abiding by the law and then face severe penalties. I find very unfair. And so just to tidy up the bill a little bit, it would be nice to remove the emergency clause.
Further discussion, Senator Mona Anderson?
Thank you, Chair Fagan. This bill has been so well vetted, and it started with some significant legislation with House Bill 2004 in 2017. I feel strongly that it should go forward without any amendments. I'm a landlord. I've had a duplex for 34 years, and yes, I've used no-clause evictions. I'm one of those landlords that doesn't raise their rents, but that's just my choice. But every one of the no-cause evictions that I had were for cause. I could have gone through the for cause. And I think it's important that once I talked with the tenants, most of them didn't want to have an eviction on their record, and so most of them we could take care of by talking through what would help them and what would also help me. So I am opposed to the -1 amendments and any other amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mona Anderson. Any further discussion on the -1 amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair. I will not be supporting amendments to this bill. While I do understand the concern, I think our colleagues make a reasonable point. But I have been struck that my general perspective, and I too am a landlord with some small units, is that we have a humanitarian crisis in this state that has gone unaddressed for too long. And while I am new to the Capitol, I believe that the road of amendments brings up the possibility that we could adjourn on June 30th once again without taking the necessary action to provide relief to hundreds of thousands of Oregonians who are suffering. I very much agree with some of the testimony that we heard that this legislation does not get to the foundational cause of this problem, which does have to do with supply. I don't agree with folks who hold the belief that supply is the only thing that should be addressed, obviously, or I wouldn't be supporting this legislation. But this does not get upstream of the problem, this bill, and we need to do that. And we heard from the Senate President and a number of others that there's a commitment to take strong action with regard to supply. We have to do that. I'd say that there's another foundational cause that even goes deeper, which is how polarized wealth and income has become in this country. And we've seen our crisis is the result of 30 or 40 years of the cost of almost everything going up except wages for so many people. That's a problem we may not solve this legislative session, but there are causes that this doesn't get to. This is triage, but triage is absolutely necessary right now. I would agree that there are flaws in this bill. I would personally be open to examining them revisions after we pass this legislation. But what's not acceptable to me is to go through this legislative session without strongly addressing the suffering that's going on in the state. And I think that this long negotiated piece of legislation is a good step in that direction. And I think we ought to put a stake in the ground and pass this legislation as is, and then have an open mind to some of the concerns we heard from the landlord community, from the mobile home community here, and think about revision. But I will take a pretty darn good bird in the hand over two theoretically perfect birds in the bush. I won't be supporting amendments.
Thank you, Senator Golden. Any further discussion? Senator Girard or Senator Knopp proposing? Okay. Well, and I will just add, with respect to removing the emergency clause, for those of you that are following along, the very last provision of the bill says that it declares an emergency as an effective upon passage, meaning upon the governor's signature. And with all due respect to the concerns that have been raised, I don't believe that 5 senators who know where we are sleeping tonight and that it is safe and warm and dry and stable are in any position to tell hundreds of thousands of Oregonians without that security that their housing situation is not an emergency. So I strongly oppose the -1 amendment for that reason.
I'm going to be leaving.
Well, with that, the clerk will call the roll.
Senator Golden?
May I hear the motion restated, please?
Motion to suspend, Madam Chair. For clarification, you're still.
No, we already passed the motion to
This
suspend,
is
yeah.
the motion to amend.
The motion is to,
On the -1 amendments.
no.
Senator Knopp? Aye. Senator Montes Anderson?
No.
Vice Chair Girard?
Excuse.
Chair Fagan?
No. The motion fails.
You got the only one that was going to.
Got the only vote.
Okay. Chair, I move Senate Bill 608 to the floor with a due pass recommendation.
Senator Montes Anderson moves Senate Bill 608 to the floor with a due pass recommendation. Is there any discussion?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair Fagan. I think it's really unfortunate. I'm actually sad today because we're making policy that ultimately is going to be counterproductive to what all the proponents testified they actually want. And many people identified what the biggest issue is. And we heard that, I think, a week ago in this committee. And that's the supply problem and lack thereof. And helping that supply market is what equalizes the imbalance between the supply and demand. And if you don't fix that, you won't fix the problem. In fact, in all likelihood, it's going to get worse. I'm a renter times 2. I rent a house in Bend, and I rent an apartment here. And I understand what it means to be a renter. I've rented many times. I've also owned homes. I think that very few people in this building have done what I've done in terms of working on and helping develop and build affordable housing. And I've worked in this space for the last 16 years now. And I can tell you that what's happening right now is going to cause people to get out of this industry. And it's already happening. I've been contacted by multiple people this week asking when this bill is going to pass. And apparently we're in a very big hurry to pass this legislation because we're not going to have a fiscal or revenue impact, which we normally do. But they're going to get out of this industry, which is going to mean less units. Less supply with continuing demand equals higher rents. So I think it is unfortunate that we're not going to actually solve the problem and that we're likely to make it worse by this legislation. And that's really what makes me sad. And so it's clear that there aren't going to be any more amendments that are going to be approved on this bill. And so, the majority is going to move forward with the legislation. And I truly hope it works out, but I think economics and the facts say otherwise.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to agree with Senator Knopp's belief that if we don't take really serious measures towards increasing housing supply, we won't solve this problem. I look forward to working with them on that. The best I can tell, given the shape of this agreement, which was a compromise where people at the table gave on various sides, I'll be supporting this legislation because I believe by a fairly wide margin it will do more good than harm to the hundreds of thousands of housing insecure Oregonians, and look forward to working on the supply problem.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Mona Anderson.
And regarding the supply problem, we do have an undersupply of housing. But as was stated, and as we have learned, the new rental housing is built for the higher income tenants who are able to pay the rents high enough to cover the construction costs. So that is why we, as an entity or the legislature, have to look at, yes, we have supply, but just remembering that those that are going into construction right now are covering, they are building housing units for the higher income tenants.
Further discussion? In closing, I will just add that I share the concerns of many people that we heard today, that I wish this bill did more, and I would be willing to go further. To quote kind of the Street Roots editorial this week, this bill is the least we can do, and I believe that's right. But a year ago, December, when I was out canvassing, I met an 83-year-old woman who had been living in the dark for 3 months because her overhead lights had gone out. But she was so afraid of a no-cause eviction or a dramatic rent spike that she wouldn't ask maintenance to fix her lights. So it was December when I met her, and she'd been living in the dark for 3 months. And she said that if the rain wasn't too heavy, she could maybe read her newspaper by the light of the courtyard lights that would stream in through her front window. And she was long cynical of politics and politicians, but she mustered up just enough faith to ask me to help her, and I told her that I would. And so despite the fact that this legislation is also not perfect for me, I will help her, and I will strongly support Senate Bill 608. Further discussion?
Yes, one more thing, Madam Chair. We heard from several people today that there are some really good, public-spirited, humane landlords in this state. And I know that to be true. I think some have been in this room today. I'm going to assume Senator Mona Anderson is one of them. I'm going to claim to be one of them myself. And really, this, I believe the problems we're facing today have been created by a very small percentage of landlords in this state. And I tend to think that I'm guessing that they tend to be more large corporate property owners who maybe don't live in this state. But we haven't found a way to word the bill that says we like to restrain greedy landlords, but not the majority of public-spirited, compassionate landlords. And, I am hoping that internally the community of landlords in this state find some way. I don't think self-policing is quite the right word, but I would, I'd love an alliance to find ways to deal with those who profiteer and are really causing a lot of suffering, and lighten up and protect the rights of landlords who are providing an important public service, making a profit because it's a business, but not profiteering, because I think that's the majority that we're working with here.
Thank you. Further discussion? Okay, seeing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Senator Golden?
Pardon me, I want to make sure with the number of motions, could we have a
Please complete the
restatement of the
underlying
motion?
motion. Yes. This is on the Senator Mona Anderson moved Senate Bill 608 to the floor with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you.
Senator Golden?
Yes.
Senator Knope? No. Senator Mona Anderson?
Aye.
Vice Chair Girard?
Excused.
Chair Fagan?
Yes. The chair passes. And as previously discussed, I will co-carry the bill with my good senator or friend, Senator Lori Mona Anderson. Well, thank you to everyone for respecting the time limits and for staying and being patient. I really appreciate that. So if there's anything else for the good of the order, I will adjourn the Senate Housing Committee.